We begin by the Mishnah on the Chavdalid Omid Beis. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Ha'oisa Sukkah beino ilonais, a person that builds a sukkah between trees. V'ha'ilonais tfanes la, and the trees serve as the walls of the sukkah. Ksheira, the sukkah is kosher. So as Rashi explains, the Mishnah here is making a distinction between this case and the case of a sukkah that's built on top of a tree. So over there it's relying on the tree. So there, even if it's kosher, but it said you can't go up on it on Shabbos and Yontif. Here, however, it's just surrounded by the trees, and that's the walls, but it's not lying on the tree itself. Any partition that cannot stand with just a regular wind is not considered to be a mechitza. So Rashi explains, we're not talking about the problem of the wind blowing down the partition, the wall altogether. We're talking about a wind that's going to shake the wall back and forth, and it doesn't stay in one place. It has to shake enough that it's not leveled within 3 tfachim. So if it's a wall that's going back and forth in the wind, that's not called a mechitza. Tanan, so we learned in here in our Mishnah, person builds a sukkah between trees, and the trees serve as the walls. Ksheira, it's a kosher sukkah. So the question is, but when you're building your tree between the walls, and the walls are between the trees, that is, and the trees are your walls, so don't they go back and forth in the wind? So how is that a kosher wall? Answers the Gemara, what are we speaking about over here? Bekashin. We're talking about a tree, a very old and strong tree, or the thicker part of the tree, that doesn't go back and forth in the wind. There are the branches of the tree that do shake back and forth in the wind. And the Mishnah says that you made the trees walls for the sukkah. It didn't distinguish which part of the tree. So the Gemara answers, the Ovedle behutze v'dafne. You took a branch of a palm tree or a branch from some other kind of tree, and you tied it around to keep it in one position. Fragt the Gemara, if so, Yachi, Maila Memra. So then what's the Chiddush of our Mishnah? Why shouldn't you be allowed to use the trees as a wall for a sukkah? The answer is, Mao, the Teime, I would think, Nigzar, there should be a Gzeire, Dilma, Osil, Shtamush, that you may come to use the tree on Shabbos and Yontif. So just like we said regarding a tree that's built, a sukkah that is, that's built on the tree, that you can't go onto it on Shabbos and Yontif, maybe the same should be here, that if the walls are trees, you also shouldn't use it because you may come to use the tree. Kamash Malan, that's the Chiddush of our Mishnah, that in this case, because it's not on the tree, you're allowed to use it, and it's kosher every day of Sukkot, including Shabbos and Yontif. Toshema, come, and I'll bring you a raya. It's a question on what Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, that a partition blowing in the wind is not a good partition. So what this is speaking about is, we had a few times this case before, that boy with water that's in the middle of the Rishus Harabim, and you want to be able to take out the water into the area of the Rishus Harabim, so you place at the 4 corners double partitions. Each side has to have the width of a tefach that creates an enclosure in that area that it becomes the Rishus HaYachid. So here, this Braisa brings various different interesting kinds of partitions that you place in the corner. So Hayasham Ilan, you had on one corner a tree that has the thickness to be like a tefach on each side. Oigeder, or you had a sort of a gate, but this is really a pile of rocks. So again, it's a pile of rocks which has the thickness of an amma for being an amma on both sides. Oy mechitza sakonim, or you had a mechitza made of reeds that are here in the corner. So it's not a full partition, but it's reeds with less than 3 tvachim between them. Nidin mishum diyumid. These 3 things can be used as the diyumid. The diyumid is that double partition on the corner, a tefach to one side, a tefach to the other side. So the question here is, but you're using a tree. Isn't a tree a partition that goes back and forth in the wind? So how could you use that as a partition for this Rishus HaYachid? So the Gemara gives the same answer. Hasam nami, there as well, mishum da'avidle behutze v'dafne. It's speaking about a tree that's tied down with a palm branch or some other branch to keep it in one place. Tashama, another question on what Rav Acha bar Yaakov said. This is also a Gemara in Erevin. Ilon ha-meisach ala haaretz. You have a tree that has very broad branches and it comes all the way down to the ground. So then, if those branches of the tree that come down to the ground are not raised up above the ground 3 tfachim, so then metaltal and tachtov. You can carry under that area which is being covered, and it creates a partition, walls around, that you're inside the Rishus HaYachid. So the question here as well is, you're using a tree for a partition. Amai, how could this be used? Hakazavasi, these branches of the tree, they come down, they create an enclosure, but they flow, they go back and forth in the wind. One answers the same thing. That it's not just there naturally, but the person actually went and tied down these branches of the tree to be in one position in that place to create this enclosure inside, that you could be there, you could live inside of it. If that's the case, that it's not just stem branches of trees that are there, but the person went by hand and tied them all down, so nataltu b'kulei should be allowed to carry inside that area, no matter how large the area is. Now, Alama Omar, Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua. So why did Rav Huna Bered Rav Yeshua say that no, you can't carry in that area regardless of how large it is? He says, Ein metaltalin bay, you can't carry in this area under these very broad branches, Ella, only if it's Beis Hasayim, an area that is up to the size of a Beis Hasayim. And this is the area, actually, the size of the Chatzar of the Mishkan. And this is a Gzeira of Chachamim, that an area that's larger than the Chatzar of the Mishkan, so then if it's not made for a place to live in, it's not allowed to carry there. We treat it like a Carmelis, you can't carry there more than 4 amas. So he said that in this area under the tree, so if you have a very broad tree, or maybe it's a few trees together, and it creates this enclosure that's larger than Beis Hasayim, so then this is too large, and this is what's called a karfif, that's too large, that's not made for living there, and therefore you can't use it, you can't carry over there. So the question of the Gemara is, but if this person went and by hand and intentionally tied down the trees to stay in one position to be able to carry there, so how are we saying that it's not an area made to live there? He himself went and tied it down in order to be able to live under it. So this is not the halacha of a karfif, which is not designated for living there. The example for that would be like an open park that has a gate around it, but it's a huge area and there's no house there, that people don't live there. But over here, he tied it down himself in order to be able to live there. So why are we saying that he can't carry there if it's so large? So the Gemara answers, even if he's going to live there, it's still a problem. It's a type of living space. Its use is made out for the open air. If the area does not have a normal house or a room or a place to live in, it's made for open air, then the Gzeira of Chachamim still applies that more than Beis Hasayim, larger than the size of the Mishkan, the Chatzah of the Mishkan, you can't carry there. Rashi's Pshat and Tashmish al means that he's creating this area to live under the tree, not because he really wants to live there, but it's really for the purpose of the avir on the outside, the airspace on the outside, that he's there in order to be able to guard his field that's there in that area. So he's not really living there, the purpose is for the outside. That's Rashi's Pshat. Other Rishonim say that the Pshat of Tashmish al means even if he's living inside, and that's his purpose, to stay there, but it's not a permanent dwelling. It's out in the open air. So therefore, this is not qualify for being a dira that Chachamim's Gzeira in this karfif more than a Beis Hasayim should not apply. Tashama, another question on Rav Acha Bar Yaakiv's halacha, that if it's a partition that's blowing in the wind back and forth, it's not a good partition. So it says in a Braisa, this is also native in Shavas Betel, if a person is resting for Shabbos on a mound, Shugavoya Asara, which is high 10 tfachim, Vuhu me'arba amas ad Beis Hasayim, and it has the space, an area on it that's from either 4 amas up to a Beis Hasayim, but not more than that, because then it's too large, as we just said. More than that, it doesn't have the halacha of Rishus HaYachid, it's the Gzeira Chachamim. And v'chein beneka, the same as with a valley, Shoama Kasare has the depth of 10 tfachim, Vuhu me'arba amas ad Beis Hasayim, and has a space of 4 amas up until Beis Hasayim. And then the third example, which is relevant for us, v'chein kama kitsura. If you have a field where the grain was reaped and it's an open area, but it has an enclosure, because v'shibailes makifes haisa. You have the stalks that are still attached to the ground that surround this area, and they're 10 tfachim high that create this enclosure. So then, in all of these examples, mahalachas kula, he can walk in the entire area. And also, v'chutzala al payamam, this entire area is considered to be like Dalat Amas, where he's living. And therefore, from here outside, he can walk another 2,000 Amas, the Tchum of Shabbos. So what do you see over here? Afal gav de ka'azal v'asi. One of the examples, the last example, was in an open field where he has the stalks of wheat around, surrounding this area. These stalks of wheat blow back and forth in the wind. They're not stable in one place. So how could we use them as a partition for this area? So the Gemara gives the same answer. Hasam nami, there as well, the ovedle behutza v'dafna. He tied it down with a hutza v'dafna to leave it in one place, and therefore this is an area that he could carry in. It is a good partition. Taisuf here says the Gemara could have asked the same question it asked before. So if so, he specifically went and tied it down for this purpose, so why does it give over here the shiur in this praisa that it's only up to a base of Sayin? He wants to live there. He tied it down, so it's not an issue of being this open area where no one lives in. And the Gemara here can't give the answer that this is a dira for avir, open airspace. According to Rashi's pshat, open airspace means you're making it in order to be able to guard another area. But over here he's not guarding any other area. He's living in this area. So why does it say only up to a base of Sayin? So Taisus answers that this situation is not as good as before when you had the tree that came down, because the tree creates a roof over the person. So over there's more reason to be makel. And therefore, we say that it's, the Gemara before says regarding the tree that comes down, the Gemara discusses this and asks the question that you should be able to carry over there. But over here, since it doesn't have the roof over it, so then it's obvious that you can't carry there more than a base of sign. A person that's engaged in doing a mitzvah is pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah. And the examples that Rashi gives over here are a person that's going on his way to learn Torah, to go and to greet his Rebbe on Yontif, which is a mitzvah, or for the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, to redeem someone that's captured. So if someone that's occupied with any of these mitzvahs or any other mitzvah will be pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah. And Rashi here says that they're pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah not only while they're traveling, but even while they're resting. While they're resting overnight, still pater from the Sukkah. Taisus here discusses this and says, why? Overnight, when they're resting, why should they be pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah? You only pater from one mitzvah if you can't do the other mitzvah. So why should they be pater from the mitzvah of Sukkah? That's what Taisus' opinion is. The whole ptur of ha'isik b'mitzvah, pater min ha-mitzvah, is only in a situation where you can't do the other mitzvah. So therefore, Taisus says, right, it's only in the time when you're actually doing the mitzvah, but not at night. But according to Rashi, though, the Ran explains that even at night, you're still going to be pater, even though you're not doing this mitzvah right now, you're resting, but because it'll be a certain tirche, if you're going to have to go find yourself a sukkah, it'll be a tirche for you while you're doing this mitzvah, so that's enough of a reason to say that you're pater from the mitzvah of sukkah. So even if you technically are able to do both mitzvahs, but if you're occupied and you're on your way with one mitzvah and you have to go out of your way of this mitzvah and it's a tirche, you're pater. Another halacha sagt the Mishnah, chaylin or mishamshein. A person that's sick and all the person that are people that are serving him. Pturim in a sukkah are also pater from the sukkah. And then, as more general halacha, oichlin v'shaisin arai chutz l'sukkah. You are allowed to eat or drink food temporarily outside the sukkah. So the Gemara starts with the halacha of ha'isik b'mitzvah, pater min ha-mitzvah. Mimina anamili. From where do I know this? The Tana Rabbana we learned in the Braisa, b'shivtecha b'veisecha, when it says in the pasuk to learn Torah or to read Kriya Shema, when you're sitting in your house, prat lo ha'isik b'mitzvah. This comes to exclude someone that's doing a mitzvah. The Gemara will explain, how do we know b'shivtecha b'veisecha is only when you're not doing a mitzvah. Then it says, you're going on your way, prat l'chasen. This comes to exclude a chasen, which is getting married and is also occupied with a mitzvah. But Rashi explains it's not exactly the same thing. Shivtecha b'veisecha means a person that's actually doing a mitzvah, or he's on his way to a mitzvah and so on. A chasen is someone that's not actually doing a mitzvah now. He may be sitting idly, but on the day of his chastana, his mind is very preoccupied. He's tarud with a mitzvah. He's thinking about the marriage and about the be'ilah of the mitzvah, which is something that is going to be difficult for him, and that is the reason why he's pater from the mitzvah, the tirda of the mitzvah. Mikan Omru, it's from here that we learned out, Hakainis as a psula, a person that marries a psula, pater, is exempt from any mitzvah. Ves almana, but if you marry an almana, chayiv, then you're chayiv in the mitzvah. The Gemara will explain soon the difference. Now the Gemara says, my mashma. What's the mashmas? Where do you see in the language of the pasuk b'shivtecha b'veisecha that's only if you're sitting in your house not doing a mitzvah? Ravona says kiderech. We compare it to what it says afterwards in the pasuk. It's like when a person travels on a way. Ma derech rishos, just like when it says derech, you're traveling on your way, and this is something which is just your own personal thing. It's a permissible thing you're doing for yourself. Avkol rishos. So too, in the case that the person is chayiv in the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, as when he's doing something with his rishos. Lafukahai the b'mitzvah asik. So therefore, we exclude this individual that's occupied with a mitzvah, is not going on his own personal derech, and therefore is not chayiv in the mitzvah. Frag the Gemara, well, how do you know this? How do you know that derech means when a person is going on his own personal way? Milo yaskinon the causal dvar mitzvah. Does derech not also include a person that's traveling for the purpose of a mitzvah? And the Torah is saying that you should read Kriya Shema then as well. Become a rachmana likri. Okay, so the Gemara answers no. The diak is the language of the pasuk itself. When you sit in your house or when you go on the way. Why does it say when you are sitting in your house or you are going on your way? The leches didach, it's a way that you're going for your own purpose. That's when you're obligated in the mitzvah. Habalech the mitzvah, but if you're going on a way for the purpose of a mitzvah, petiris, then you'll be potter. So this is the source for al-isik b'mitzvah, potter min ha-mitzvah. So the Gemara asks, if so, even a person that's getting married, he's doing a mitzvah, and he's marrying an almana, he should also be potter because of the tirda of the mitzvah. So the Gemara answers, a person that's getting married to a besula, his mind is preoccupied, he's worrying about the be'ilah shel mitzvah, since she's a besula. So there's besulim in the be'ilah when he's having relations with her. So he has to make sure to do the mitzvah right. So that's something that he's concerned about. His mind is preoccupied with this. But a person that's getting married to an almana and the mitzvah, the maisa mitzvah of the be'ilah is much easier. So that's something he's not concerned about. So it doesn't hold him back of doing another mitzvah. Wait a minute, if this is the premise here, if your mind is preoccupied with something, so you don't have the obligation to do a mitzvah, so anytime your mind is preoccupied, you'll be potter from doing a mitzvah? If so, how about if a person's ship sank in the water, that the person's mind is very preoccupied about this loss, so too will be potter from a mitzvah? And if you're going to say, yes, maybe that's actually the halacha, but we know that it's not so, because Oval is obligated to fulfill all mitzvahs of the Torah. The only one he's potter from is tefillin, because by tefillin it uses the expression of pe'er, that it's the beauty of the person, so we don't want him to have that beauty in the time of Avelis. So if so, what do I see over here? That a person that's preoccupied in a place where he's mourning someone that passed away, nevertheless he's obligated to do a mitzvah. So why are we saying that the issue of the chassan that's getting married is the fact that his mind is preoccupied? So the Gemara answers, it's not the same thing. Here we're talking about a person that's Torah, his mind is the chassan, his mind is preoccupied with a mitzvah. So here the Torah says that your mind is preoccupied with what? With a mitzvah. You're not obligated to clear your mind and do another mitzvah because you're preoccupied with a mitzvah. But Hassam, but you're talking about an oval or a person that is boat capsized and his mind is preoccupied with his own personal loss. That's something that the Torah obligates you to clear your mind to do the mitzvah. You have to make that effort. So therefore, that's not a tird of a mitzvah. Rashi says the avelos, the mitzvah of avelos that a person has to mourn only requires a person to behave with the avelos of not putting on the shoes, not bathing, and so on. And but the tsar, the actual pain that he has, that his mind is preoccupied with his loss, that he's grieving, that's not something which is a mitzvah. That's a terda de rishos, and you're obligated to free your mind to be able to do the mitzvah. Frag the Gemara, v'ha'isik b'mitzvah, patim in a mitzvah, mehacha nafke, this halacha, that if you're isik in one mitzvah, you're pater of the other. We learn it from here, from this pasuk of b'shiftecha and b'lechtecha v'derech. Mehasam nafke. We learn it from another place. The Tanya, we learn it in Abraisa. And this is the story when the Yidden complained that they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach, the Parsha of Pesach Sheni and Parshas Baloischa. There were people that were tamei and they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. So who were these people? So there's a few opinions here. The first opinion is they were the people that were carrying the coffin of Yosef that they carried with them wherever they went in the midbar, so they were tamei. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says, Mishal vel Tzofan hayu, these were Mishal and Al Tzofan. Shaya Oiskim ben Nadav Aviyu. They were occupied with carrying out the bodies of Nadav and Aviyu from the Mishkan when they died there. So Rabbi Yitzchak argues with both of these opinions, and he says, Im if it was the people carrying the coffin of Yosef, they had ample time to become tired. As Rashi says, they came there to Har Sinai over 10 months before. By the time it came to this carbon, which was the second year after they came out of Mitzrayim, they left the Aron of Yosef for such a long time, so they had enough time to be tired. And Mishal vel Tzofan hayu, and even if it was Mishal and Al Tzofan that took out Nadav and Aviyu, so then Yechayil hayu litar, they also could have been mitar themselves. As Rashi explains, because when did the Mishkan go up? On the first day, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan to Yudalad Nisan is 2 weeks. So they had enough time. The Paraduma was then made on the next day. Sorry. So they had enough time to be mitar themselves, to bring the Korban Pesach. So therefore he says, who were they? Ella oiskin b'meis mitzvah hayu. Rather, these are people that were oisik in a meis mitzvah. It doesn't refer to the usual expression of meis mitzvah that's used. That's an unattended dead person that there's a mitzvah to attend to him. But it just means a relative where there's a mitzvah to go and bury him. So there were people that became tummy because they had to bury someone. Shachal shvi shelahen liyes be'erev Pesach. And the 7th day of them toiveling and being tar was exactly on that day of Erev Pesach. Shanema, how do we see this? Because in the pasuk it says, "V'lo yachlu lasais ha-Pesach b'yoymahu," and they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach on that day. Why does it have to say b'yoymahu? B'yoymahu and yechayil lasais, but halamacha yechayil lasais. It was specifically that day that they couldn't bring it, but on the following day they would be able to bring it. So, what do we see over here? These were people that when they went to bury their relatives, they already knew that the mitzvah of Korban Pesach is going to be within that week. And the last day is going to be the day that they won't be able to bring the Korban Pesach. Nevertheless, they went and did their mitzvah. And once they're doing that mitzvah, they're potter from the Korban Pesach, ha'isik mitzvah, potter min mitzvah. So therefore, this is the source of this concept. We don't have to have the source from B'shivtecha b'veisecha. So the Gemara answers, tzriche, I need both sources. The Ashmin and Asam, if we would have just had the previous source, I would say the reason is, Mishom, again, Hassam is the source that we brought right over here from the Korban Pesach, that 7 days earlier they went to do another mitzvah, knowing that they wouldn't be able to bring the Korban Pesach. So I would say, Hassam, Mishum Deloi Matas Man, Chiyuv de Pesach. Over there, because the time of the actual mitzvah of Korban Pesach did not arrive yet. So in such a case, even if you know you won't be able to do another mitzvah, I can understand, yes, ha'isik b'mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah. Right now, this is the mitzvah, only mitzvah I have in front of me, so I have to fulfill this mitzvah. When the time of the other mitzvah will come and I won't be able to do it, so be it. Now there's this mitzvah. Aval hacha, there's matas man kriyashma, but in a case where you're being ha'isik in one mitzvah, and there's another mitzvah that now this is the time for the mitzvah at the same time, so maybe over here I would say that you're obligated to do the mitzvah of Kriyashma. Tzricha, therefore I need the pasuk of B'shivtecha and B'lechtecha to say that when you're doing a mitzvah, you're going on your way, engaged in a mitzvah, even if it's the time of mitzvah's Kriyashma, you don't have to do it. Yashmin and Acha, on the other hand, if we're only bringing the pasuk of B'shivtecha and B'lechtecha, I would say Mishum Deleke Kadas. Here the other mitzvah, which is Kriyashma, is not such a significant mitzvah to the extent that there's a chiyuv kares if you don't fulfill it. Aval Hasan, the ikke kares over there, we're talking about a mitzvah, Korban Pesach, that if you don't bring it, there's a chiyuv of kares. Eimeloi, maybe there this rule of ha'isik b'mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah doesn't apply for such an important mitzvah. Tzriche, that's why we have that pasuk that we always apply this concept of ha'isik b'mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah. The basis of this idea of ha'isik b'mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah, al pi chassidus, it's brought in the Rebbe Sichos in a few places, is that ultimately all mitzvahs are the same. Ratzon of the Eibishter, shekitshana b'mitzvaysa b'tzivana. So the fact that a person is Isaac in one mitzvah is potter from another mitzvah, he's not really giving up the other mitzvah. Doing this mitzvah, you have the essence of what the other mitzvah is about, which is fulfilling the Ratzon of Hashem. If you want to look at the detail of what the mitzvah is, every mitzvah is different. But if you look at the klal of what a mitzvah is about, you're actually doing that mitzvah. So it's not potter that you're giving up on it. Adarabah, you're doing a mitzvah. And then one mitzvah is the same klal of all mitzvahs. Talk to Gemara Gufa. Going back now to a part of the statement that was mentioned before. Oval is obligated to fulfill all mitzvahs in the Torah, chutz mitzvah, besides the mitzvah of tefillin. Regarding tefillin, it says pe'er, the beauty, and an oval should not be with a mitzvah that gives him beauty. Now, another thing, the Eibusha says to Yecheskel, your beauty will be on you, on your head. So Abish is telling Yecheskel that his wife will pass away, but nevertheless, he'll be allowed to put on the tefillin, which is his pe'er. So what do we see from that? To the mechayvis. You're going to be obligated to put on the tefillin and have this beauty. But anybody else is going to be potter from this mitzvah of tefillin, of this pe'er. So Taisus explains, even though the Gemara is bringing a pasuk as a source for this, that you potter from tefillin, but nevertheless it says first the reason of pe'er, that you shouldn't put on tefillin because the beauty, and beauty is not befitting for an oval. Because otherwise I maybe would have thought that when it says by Yecheskel that he could put on the tefillin and anybody else can't, that maybe I should learn from there regarding all mitzvahs, the same thing. There's nothing unique about the tefillin. So therefore the Gemara clarifies first, no, that there is something unique about the tefillin, that it's not just stam a mitzvah, but it's also a mitzvah that gives the person a pe'eh. But the Gemara now concludes and says, when is this that you potter from the tefillin? B'yom rishon, on the first day of the Avelus, t'chsiv, achrisa, k'yom mar, the day after will be like a bitter day, referring to the first day of the Avelus. Another statement he said, Oval chayiv b'sukkah, and Oval is obligated to sit in the sukkah. For the Gemara, pshita, of course, why not? And for the Gemara, ma'od detayme, I would think to say, Hoyel v'amar rove, that's what the Bach is guided here. That Rava said that mitztayer is potem in a sukkah. That a person that has pain and suffering sitting in the sukkah, he's not obligated to sit in the sukkah. So hi, nami mitztayer. So this individual has pain sitting in the sukkah. He's avelus, he's mourning, he's grieving, he doesn't want to be in the sukkah. Kamash malan. So therefore he's teaching you hanimili tzayir de memela. The fact that a mitztayer is potem in a sukkah is the tzar that comes from the sukkah. Sitting in the sukkah, it's too much sun, too much rain. That's a kind of tzar that you potter from. Aval hacha iu kadekam mitztayer nafshay. He is the one that's having the suffering that himself, the feelings that he has because of his mourning. So his obligation now when it comes to doing the mitzvah is to calm himself down and clear his mind to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. Another statement he said, Chosan v'ashishvinin. The Chosan and all those accompanying him, the Chobnei HaChuppah and all the people there at the Chuppah that are there. The chuppah is actually an area that's designated for the chassan and kala to be in for 7 days and to enjoy their time with each other there. Peturim in a sukkah. They're pater from the sukkah. Kol shiva, all 7 days of sukkahs. My time, what's the reason? Mishum debol lemechti, because they have to enjoy their time with each other in this chuppah to be there together, and they're not in the sukkah. Fragt the Gemara, but so what? Velech le besukkah, velech de besukkah. Let them eat in the sukkah and have the joy of the chasana and of the Shabbat brachas. Let it all be in the sukkah. So the Gemara says, "Ein simcha ela b'chuppah." No, the place of the simcha, the chasan and the kala is this specific designated area in the chuppah. That's the place of their simcha, not in the sukkah. Fragt the Gemara, so v'leich le b'sukkah. Let them fulfill the mitzvah and eat in the sukkah. And then the lechta b'chuppah, and then they'll go back to the chuppah, that area for the chasan and kala, and they can enjoy each other's company over there. So the Gemara answers, "Ein simcha le b'makom suda." The joy of the chasan and kala, enjoying each other's company, is in the place where they eat together. So if they have to go and eat in the sukkah and then come back and sit in the chuppah, that's not going to be for them any simcha. Fragt the Gemara, but v'lev the chuppah b'sukkah. So let the designated area called the chuppah for the chasan and kala be inside the sukkah itself. So Abaye says, Mishom Yichud. The issue over here is that it may end up being an issue of Yichud, where the Kala may end up being with someone else alone, not with her Chassan. So as Rashi explains, because in those times it was customary for the sukkahs to be built on the rooftop, and the chassan and kala are sitting there, but maybe the chassan will have to go out and someone else remains there alone with the kala, and there's not a lot of people there. It could end up being an issue of yichud where you have the kala and someone else secluded together in that area. Rabba Marava says there's another issue. Mishum tsar chassan. The issue is that this is a tsar for the chassan, that you have this area, a sukkah, which is an open area. A sukkah very often is built just with 3 walls, it's exposed, it's open, and he doesn't feel comfortable to have this private area where he wants to spend time with his wife to enjoy a company together. So therefore a chassan is a place that's a tsar for the chassan to be here with her. So therefore the chuppah can't be placed inside the sukkah. What's the difference between Abayi's reason and Rava's reason? So very simple. If it's a place, the sukkah is built in a place, a public place where people are coming in and out all the time. The one that says that the issue is we're concerned that maybe the kala may end up being there alone and someone else will be there with her. So lekes, you don't have that issue here. But if the reason is that the chassan is not enjoying his time with his wife, there's no privacy here, so of course you have that issue here as well. Rab Zayda says, when I got married with my kala, so I ate in the sukkah, and then the chadi b'chuppah, and then after I finished eating, I went and enjoyed my time with her inside the chuppah in that designated area. And the kol shekain, the chadi liboy, and here I even had more simcha in my heart, the kavidna tarti. I did too. I did the mitzvah of sukkah, and I have the mitzvah of being with my wife and bringing her joy. So I was able to do 2 mitzvahs. The Rosh actually says that Rab Zayda is arguing with Rabba Bazav Domarav, and he's saying that this is the way it should be done. You should go to the sukkah and eat in the sukkah and then come back. And he actually paskins like Rab Zayda that a chassan is chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah. However, the Rambam, the Rif disagree and say Rab Zayda was saying that this is what he actually did, but he's not arguing, and we paskin that a chassan is potter from the mitzvah of sukkah. Tana Rabbana v'let nabraise chassan v'ashishvinin v'chol b'nei chuppeh peturim min atfilah. A chassan and all the people accompanying him are all potter from davening. And the reason is because the mitzvah of davening, we're speaking here about Shmoneh Esrei, takes kavanah. You have to be mechavan when you daven. So when they're busy with the chassan and the chassan himself, they can't have that kavanah. Umenat tefillin, also from tefillin, for the very same reason, because they're eating and drinking and there's kalas roish, and so therefore it's not a time that they can't focus on putting on the tefillin without this kalas roish. However, they are obligated in the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, even though it requires kavanah as well, but it only requires kavanah, as Rashi says, for the first pasuk. And for that, they're able to have the kavanah. Yishom, Rab Shila Amru, in the name of Rab Shila it was said, Chassan Potter. The chassan is also potter from Kriya Shema because he's too preoccupied. But as he said before, the other people accompanying him over there in this chuppah, they're all obligated because they could clear their minds to read that one pasuk. So Rashi and Taisus as well both say that these 2 Tanaim here, Rab Shila and the beginning of the Braisa, Chanakama, they're not basing this all on the concept of Isaac b'mitzvah, Potem and mitzvah. They don't hold of that, because if they would hold Isaac b'mitzvah, Potem and mitzvah, so then the chassan and everyone else with him would be Potem from tefillin, and even from Kriya Shema as well. It makes no difference. Or Isaac b'mitzvah, the Potem and mitzvah. Rather, they hold Isaac b'mitzvah is chayiv to do another mitzvah. But the issue over here is the kavanah. It's not possible to have kavanah. So therefore, you can't fulfill the mitzvah. And their argument is regarding Kriya Shema, whether the chassan could or could not have kavanah for that one pasuk of Kriya Shema.